Why is it that we can be so kind in our thoughts and actions towards other people, but we can be so cruel and judgmental in our thoughts and actions towards ourselves? Why is it for some of us the hardest job we have is to actually be kind and compassionate to ourselves? Just accepting ourselves in the way we are, that becomes such a hard deal. And for some other weird reason, we think that the harsher we are to ourselves, the more critical we are of ourselves, this is going to be the thing that actually changes us, and it doesn't. So today I want to look at some obstacles to acceptance, the acceptance of life, the acceptance of yourself, and I also hope to share some spiritual insight and awakening of how we can overcome those obstacles so we can better accept the circumstances in life and better accept ourselves. But first, I want to say welcome to SPERO DEI, wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever city, whatever nation you are watching us today. I just want to say welcome, and thank you for tuning in to SPERO DEI. So as I'm in this series, Radical Acceptance, I want to share another story from the life of King David of Israel that just might awaken us a bit more and help us reimagine a different kind of spiritual life and a different relationship with accepting life and accepting ourselves. Now, let me set up this story a bit. In the Hebrew timeline, the events I'm about to share with you, they take place in the 10th century BCE. This is about 1,000 years before Christ. Now, I'm going to have to be forthright with you, and I'm going to have to be honest. Biblical scholars, be it Jewish or Christian, along with archaeologists, they are inconclusive of whether David actually was a real person, King David. And for something to be historically certain, because the scholars are uncertain, in scholarship you need to have more than one piece of evidence. You need to have corroborating evidence. And outside the Bible, there is no evidence that King David exists. They haven't found it in Egyptian, Syrian, Assyrian documents of the time. No major or any archaeological dig in Jerusalem has brought forth even the mention of David's name. Now, in 1993, north of Jerusalem in the Tan area of Galilee, archaeologists found a small triangular piece of basalt rock that was inscribed in Aramaic. The rock used to be part of a war pillar, kind of celebrating that the king of Syria, fought the Israelite army in the 9th century, a century after David. And on this small triangle piece, they found the words, "Be it David," which means house of David or dynasty of David. This is the only contemporaneous evidence we have ever found. It's not conclusive, but it certainly gives a strong indication that there just might have been a king called David around that time. But either way, whether you are a person that goes, the stories of the Bible are fact, or you're a person that go, whether they're fact or not, that doesn't matter to me. What I do hope for whoever you are is that the story, this unique and even sweet story I'm about to share with you, more than trying to determine whether it's fact or truth or fiction, that you would look for the trueness in the story and how this trueness can bring you deeper into your spiritual life and draw some true understandings of what it means to be more accepting of life and of yourself. Now, to the story. When Israel was in a fierce battle with the Philistine army, Israel's first king, Saul, he's all shot up through arrows, and he's barely hanging on. He's barely alive. In the battle, his 3 sons, they are killed, including his son Jonathan, who also happens to be best friends with Saul's arch enemy, David, who's going to be the future king of Israel. So here Saul is clinging to his life, and he turns to his armor bearer, "Kill me, run me through with my sword." Because Saul knows that if the Philistine army finds him still alive, the king, they'll torture him. It's just going to be worse. But the armor bearer is just too afraid. He doesn't want to be the one to kill his own king. So Saul manages to upend his own sword and fall on it and kill himself. Now, when the news of Saul and Jonathan, the death of them, reaches Jonathan's 5-year-old Jonathan has a 5-year-old son. When this news reaches the son's caretakers, they become very afraid. They go, "We got to get out of here. We got to get this kid out of here." Because in king speak and monarchy speak, if you became the king and the former king died, one of the things you did as the new king is you killed all the old heirs, all the old family, so they can't rise up and with a coup or give some claim on the throne. So this is why they're in a scurry, and this is why they go, "We've got to leave." And the son's name is Mephibosheth, and the caretaker, the nurse, goes to pick him up, and in the panic she drops him. It must have been quite a fall, so much so that the kid's legs are severely injured and he's never able to walk again. Let's look at this in Samuel. Saul's son Jonathan had a son named Mephibosheth, who had not been able to walk since he was 5 years old. It happened when someone told his nurse that Saul and Jonathan had died. She hurried off with the boy in her arms, but he fell and injured his legs. So fast forward after this part of the story. David eventually does become king. And he doesn't really want to follow those king rules and put to death an heir of Saul and Jonathan. Because in the past, David and Jonathan had a friendship, had a deep brotherly love for each other. And so David is wondering the complete opposite. Look at this in chapter 9. One day, David thought, "I wonder if any of Saul's family are still alive. If they are, I will be kind to them because I made a covenant, a promise to Jonathan." So what about that? What is this covenant? It's a promise. And what was this promise they made? Okay, let's rewind back to 1 Samuel 18 and let me read about this. Jonathan's life became bound up with David's life, and Jonathan loved David as much as himself. And Jonathan and David made a covenant together because Jonathan loved David as much as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his armor, as well as his sword and his bow and his belt. This friendship ran so deep that at one point, King Saul even tries to kill David because he's so jealous that he's going to become king. And Jonathan opposes his own father. He's even in line, or could be in line for the throne, and he opposes his own father just to save David because he loves him that much. And it's really after that crazy point that they make this bond and make this covenant. And this covenant would be if and when David becomes king, he would stay faithful and loyal to Jonathan and his family. So now back to the story. David called in Ziba, one of the officials of Saul's family. David said, "So are you Ziba?" "Yes, your majesty, I am." David asked, "Are any of Saul's family still alive? If there are, I want to be kind to them." Ziba answered, "One of Jonathan's sons is still alive, but he can't walk." So David then asks Ziba, he goes, "Well, where does he live?" And Ziba goes, "He lives in Lodabar." So David sends some of his people to Lodabar to find Jonathan or Mephibosheth and bring him back. Let's read. When Mephibosheth came to David, he quickly bowed down with his face touching the ground. David asked, "Are you Mephibosheth?" "Yes, I am, your majesty." "Don't be afraid," David told him. "I'll be kind to you because Jonathan was your father, and I made a promise to him. I'm going to give you back the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul. Besides that, you will always eat with me at my table." Mephibosheth bowed again and said, "Why should you care about me? I'm worth no more than a dead dog." Then the king called Ziba, Saul's official, and said, "I have given Saul's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You, your sons, and your farmhands should farm the land for him and harvest the crops so that Saul's family will have food to eat. However, Saul's grandson Mephibosheth will always eat at my table." Ziba responded, "I will do everything you've asked, your majesty." From then on, Mephibosheth ate at David's table as one of the king's sons. Now, eating at the king's table, it meant not only that you got to enjoy the best food in all of the land, but you also fell under royal protection as a friend of the ruler. And having Saul, his grandfather's land, completely restored to him, this was really unheard kindness. This is a sweet story at this point because it comes out of love that two friends had for each other. And David stays committed to that love even though Jonathan is now passed. And it also shows how life has a way of digging us up in certain ways that it's hard to accept ourselves. In a way that we no longer see our own worth, we no longer see our value. This is how Mephibosheth sees himself. In his own eyes, he views himself as unacceptable. He's no longer royal. He's not even able to walk. So let's talk from this story some obstacles that there can be to acceptance of life and acceptance of ourselves. Now, radical acceptance, it's much easier to understand up here than it is to practice. And to weave through some obstacles, many times we have to weave through our own hurt and our own resentment. So here's one of those obstacles, and it's this. I keep trying to control and fix this external thing. Look at this in 2 Samuel. David asked, "Are any of Saul's family still alive? If there are, I want to be kind to them." Ziba answered, "One of Jonathan's sons is still alive, but he can't walk." "Well, where is he?" the king asked. "He is at Lodabar," Ziba told him, the king. Now, once Mephibosheth realizes that he's no longer an heir to the throne as he's growing, after his father, my father didn't become king, that means I'm not going to become king. He literally moves to a town called Nothing. Lodabar, it actually means nothing town. It means a no-name town. He moves to the middle of nowhere because he lives in fear. He's trying to he doesn't know that David has good intentions towards him yet. So he's trying to bring as much control and security to his life. But the thing about trying to control life is we can't control life. And whenever we try to control life, we are warding off acceptance of it. And this is what happens to Mephibosheth. It's what happens to us. Now, here's one of the interesting things the scriptures reveal to us. When somebody would approach Jesus in his day, say they were experiencing a hardship, maybe it's a disease they faced, maybe it's a loved one they've lost or they're about to lose, maybe it is some hurt, some rejection they're going through, right? Some hardship. Oftentimes, their focus, and understandably so, is this external thing, right? It's the sickness, it's the death, it's the hardship. But when they come to Jesus, he does the opposite. Jesus is not focusing on the external thing and trying to control the external thing. Again, he models the opposite. Jesus first goes internal. He goes to the inner life. But because Christ knows that when you go to the external, you are more prone to add to the noise of it, especially when you can't control it, right? Will react more than respond. But when you go to an inner place, and Jesus would often go off and be with his inner life and calm. When Jesus would be around people going through that, he'd say, Martha, sit. When he was dealing with his critics, he would stay silent and measured way before he spoke. And Jesus just modeled and taught, you go to your internal life. You stay centered. Because whenever we are trying to control the external, it just lays down an obstacle to accepting life as is. It makes it more tumultuous. And so we just, we're trying to ward off life. We're trying to resist something, whether consciously or unconsciously, that is creating an obstacle to acceptance. So, like Jesus, let's first go internal. Okay, here's another obstacle. It's thinking my anger is what punishes the other person. It doesn't punish the other person, it punishes us. You see, David could have stayed bitter and hurt at Saul, all that Saul had brought him, and in a monarchy sense, he has a right to show his anger and to punish, but he doesn't. But sometimes we do. We tell ourselves this thought, if I let go, that'll be letting them off the hook. I won't be able to punish them, and they have to be punished. Our held onto anger can seem like you're punishing the other person, but you're not. And we can think, as long as I stay angry, they're not going to get away with it, because if I let go of my anger, that means they will get away with it. And we don't want it to be easy for the other person. When our feelings are deep and intense, we desperately want that other person to understand the hurt that they've caused. So our anger to ourselves, it becomes this marker, this thing we need. It's almost a memorial to their actions and my feelings about their actions. And when we fear letting go of those emotions, it's because maybe it'll be like I'll treat it like it never happened. So we hold on. But we just create an obstacle to acceptance of life. This thinking may initially make sense. I know, it sounds good. The problem is, as I've said, it doesn't work. And when someone has treated us unfairly, they either know it or they don't. If they recognize their actions were unkind, then my forceful anger, if I keep at it, if they recognize it, it just might create more noise, more distractions. Suddenly now I've given them more reason to be distracted by my forcefulness, for them to be defensive about. But if I can let it go, maybe their awakening allows them to focus on what they did. We would be better off, instead of reacting with anger, we would be better off to set boundaries, to speak of our feelings to somebody and how it hurt us. And so those would be the healthier things, to speak honestly and firmly about your hurts, so you can move on, so you can now move forward. Okay, here's another obstacle to acceptance. Oh, I need to stay angry and big to protect myself. So not only do we hold on anger to punish them, we hold on to anger to protect ourselves. Listen, radical acceptance can seem very risky. David, as a king, he took a big risk here, showing this kind of kindness to Mephibosheth. He doesn't know Mephibosheth's intentions yet. But yet he bypasses that and shows him the kindness. We can sometimes use our own anger so we can withdraw and protect ourselves. I don't know, perhaps you were hurt in the past. Maybe you forgive too easily, and maybe you made some mistakes in showing love. So this time you go, I'm going to do it differently. But it just holds off acceptance, and the kind of acceptance of it and them that will set you free. Okay, here's another obstacle. If I accept it, it means I'm agreeing with it, right? And I'm never going to agree with what happened. Now, David could have told himself this, right? He could say, listen, if I let this kid in, it's going to condone everything that his grandfather Saul did to me and even did to our nation. But he doesn't. And maybe it's this word, maybe the word accept confuses us, because the dictionary definition of acceptance means you approve of something, right? We accept a job, we accept invitations, we accept the cash. All these understandings of acceptance mean I agree to take it. But radical acceptance does not mean that. It does not mean that you are agreeing to a situation or an action. What accepting means is you're acknowledging that it's real. You're acknowledging reality, and you're not fighting reality. And whenever we fight reality, we create an obstacle of not accepting things. It's a refusal to accept it, right? A refusal to accept reality. Just creates more emotional pain for you. Just allows that pain to dig deeper. And it's the same in how you treat your own behaviors, right? If you can accept your own behaviors, and it doesn't mean you don't feel bad about them or feel remorse. We can separate agreement and acceptance. Acceptance is just reality. Gosh, that is what I did. My gosh, that is what I said. These are the consequences for this ill move I made. And so it doesn't mean you're saying it's okay. It just means you can deal with reality. And once you deal with reality, now you're able to accept and move towards healing. Well, before we go, I want to talk about self-acceptance. what is self-acceptance? You know, the National Library of Medicine defines it this way, that it's an individual's acceptance of all of their attributes, all of them, positive or negative. And this includes first a bodily acceptance, expressing comfort with and love for your body, despite not being completely satisfied with all aspects of your body. And as you can see, Mephibosheth struggles with this. Second is a self-protection acceptance. This means you can still accept yourself even when you get negative judgments from others. And then the third is a personal capacity acceptance. You feel and believe in your own capacities. You recognize, appreciate, and develop positive thoughts and feelings about your capacities and realizations. And we can simply see that Mephibosheth suffered in all of these three areas. Now, folks, here's what the studies show. People who have high self-acceptance also had high levels of intimate attachment, relational attachment in their lives from their parents or their caregivers, their families. The two go hand in hand. And when you understand how relational attachment affects our view of ourselves, you conclude, of course. This is why you can meet someone who has incredible gifts. They have incredible talents, accomplishments. They might even have incredible beauty, yet they still might be tremendously self-critical. They have all of these obstacles to work through, and their accomplishments don't even do it. Or you can meet someone who's just normal and average, just an everyday person, and they hardly have any obstacles to self-acceptance at all. They're so centered, they're so self-adjusted, they have a healthy view of themselves, even though they're not an all-star in any way, because they had some sort of attachment that was healthy. And just when David says, "Don't be afraid," he is showing an obstacle that we can have to self-acceptance, and that is, some of us still believe that if we punish ourselves, it will change us. If I'm hard on myself, it will change me. If I judge myself, I'll be able to shame myself into perfection. And it just doesn't work. And here's another obstacle to self-acceptance. When Mephibosheth says, "I have no more worth than a dead dog," we don't think we deserve self-acceptance. And when we don't think we deserve it, you just continue to exacerbate and fuel lack of self-acceptance. And again, we just seem to think, if I can manage control over the things in my life, and we develop this, if I can conquer things, seize things back, control things, I'll be able to ward these things off. And this whole idea of perfection, when we set up this whole idea of perfection, we're already setting up our lack of performance in it. Thus, we create a judgment for ourselves because of it. So listen, being so harsh on yourself, shaming yourself into perfection, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Do some deep work on this. Go to Google and look these things up. Go to Psychology Today and read some articles online about this. But I think the last thing I want to say about this spiritually is we really have a wrong perspective of change and perfection. We actually think when we say God is perfect, we actually start with this idea that God is stasis. There's no reason to change, because if you change in any way, you suddenly become less than. There's that slippery slope. This is a weird perspective of God is the same or God is perfect. When Jesus was discipling people, he didn't start at the top of the mountain and said, listen, this is perfection. Anything less than this is the slippery slope. No, Jesus always started his journey at the bottom of the mountain. And the whole idea of perfection is the journey. The idea of perfection, that God is perfect, is not stasis. Not that God doesn't change or God doesn't evolve, but that God is dynamic. Life is dynamic. And so when we have this whole spiritual concept of perfection, it's the same today as it is yesterday and never changes, then when we don't hit that mark, we've already set ourselves up to feel like failures and already set up ourselves to feel less than acceptable. But when you go, life is imperfect, life is dynamic, God is dynamic. And I'm not saying God is less than perfect. I'm saying we change our mind what perfection is. And perfection is not stasis, staying the same. So therefore, if you're not, you miss it. View perfection as progression. Everything that is mature, everything that is, progresses and evolves in life. You do, life does, spiritual faith does. This gives me hope. This allows me to accept life and spirituality and God as is. This is reality. And accepting myself in that reality and accepting life as is in this reality, it starts freeing me of those obstacles, and I find life, faith, myself more and more acceptable, which allows me to become more and more healthy.
Daily, I surrender. Grace for today is all that I need. Surprised by mercy, it's new every morning. Awaken my soul to sing. Awaken my soul to sing, and I will trust where you lead. I will trust when I can't see. Morning by morning, great is your faithfulness to me. Breath by breath, overtaken by wonder. One step at a time when I'm overwhelmed. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Awaken my soul to sing. Awaken my soul to sing, and I will trust where with all
Hey, SPERO DEI. I'm Brett Byer.
And I'm Tammy Starling. We're going to give you a financial update.
So one, we want to start out with that we are really excited about our great news about how the finances has come out. And in particular, what I want to do is take you back a little bit about what happened last year. If you remember, we had to make some major cuts. Our staff has been incredible, but they actually took some pay cuts. We also had a lot of expenses that we nipped and really tightened everything up. And that took us a long ways. But what we needed, that we talked about you in the end of the year, was we needed your help. And boy, did you step up. You know, we are an affirming church. We've got challenges, obviously, because people need to believe in what we believe in to give, and you did it. And we're so excited. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Tammy.
Hey, you know, when we came to you back in December, we were on pace for a shortfall at the year end of about $165,000. And our year-end giving came through and really came close. We had donations of $130,000 at that time. And during the first 4 months of the year, January through April, each month we've been able to cover our monthly expenses of $53,000 with our donations. Our cash on hand right now is $115,000, which we want to keep strong. And we're just so thankful and grateful to each of you for the generosity and for it. It's such a testimony to your belief and your faith and your just support of this church and what this church is all about. And so I'm going to pass it over to Paul Allen, who's going to give you some information about what lies ahead.
Thanks, Tammy. And SPERO DEI, man, we ask you to step up, and boy, did all of you rise to the occasion. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are in the black, and that is fantastic. And we've got savings, and that's amazing. And we always want to keep about $100,000 in the bank account in cash as our kind of floor there. But we are in the black on this budget. But I want everyone to recall that over the last 2 years, we have cut and cut and cut to make the budget. There's a lot of people on staff that has taken significant pay cuts, and we want to get them back up to where the pay that they deserve. We want to have enough money to where we can add to our staff. We want to have enough money to where we can minister to the community and continue to grow this unique, special place. So we're going to continue to challenge you with our 3 goals. And that is, 1, if you're not giving and this place is special to you, please consider giving. 2, if you are giving, but you have the ability to give more, then we would challenge you to consider that. And then finally, and this is a major one, it is so much easier for the church to be able to budget if you become an automatic recurring giver. So if you give but you're not recurring, please consider that. This is an amazing place. Y'all are amazing. You stepped up, and I cannot wait to see what our future holds. Thank you so much, SPERO DEI. This place is the best.
Sit there while I tell you just how beautiful you look tonight. As if you haven't heard me say it about 100 times. You shake your head and look away. I promise that I've tried my hardest to let go of this, but every time I think about a world without you in it, my life becomes a darker shade of gray. Hey, hey, and all I wanna do is make you smile. When darkness still ensues, I wanna be alive. Whatever we go through, I'll make it worth your while. 'Cause every minute, every hour, every day, I wanna make you smile. Stand and keep on staring while I tell you that you're all I need. And even though I know you know that I'm a fighting breed, I'm gonna keep on showing you exactly what